Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and in this video, I'm going to rank the 11 demo characters from Granblue Fantasy Relink. The game is on the cusp of its release. I'm sure a few lucky physical copy havers already have theirs, but there's been a lot of discussion in my stream about which of the 11 characters is good, bad, or somewhere in the middle. So I wanted to rank them. Now keep in mind, this ranking is based on a combination of elements. It's not like a raw output-related ranking, because ranking level 10 characters with no sort of upgrades, character progression, or anything at all on their power seems kind of pointless. I mean, it's worth noting which ones definitely perform well without any of that stuff, but I think it's taken away a little bit much from the characters who just feel like they need some of those progression elements to get going. I'll make sure to note talents that I hope some of these characters get along the way to help with those shortcomings, but at the very least, I can say I enjoyed playing almost all of them. Just means more grinding for me when the game comes out. Anyway, let's get on with the ranking. So sitting at number 11 is going to be Lancelot. You know, I didn't think he was going to be at the bottom here, but I just had to go back over everything and stick him right down here because this is probably the number one character that I felt needed some sort of character progression in order to really get going. Now, it's not that he doesn't have anything going for him. Lancelot is really flashy, he's easy to play, and his fast and frequent dodging definitely makes you feel like you're having a good time and just kind of skirting around the combat while constantly keeping uptime. He feels good to play, and realistically, that's one of the most important things because that means that it's just a sort of output related issue. And the big problem with him in the demo was that it never really felt like he got going. He had a really slow passive generation for his ice blades. The utility on the freeze was nice, but not something that I would really write home about. And it just feels like you're doing less than everyone else. I don't know if that's just because he's one of the fast users of his weapons. You know, maybe it's just so much small chip damage that it's kind of hard to take appreciation for it, but I never felt like I was contributing nearly as much as when I was playing some of the other characters. Definitely feels like he's going to get some progression, especially towards his Ice Blade passive that gets going, because it just felt like it was taking way too long in the demo itself. So he's down here strictly from what I feel like is a needs talent perspective, but at the very least, I think a lot of people are going to enjoy playing him. Number 10 is going to be Goza, and this one feels bad because he actually was my favorite character to play. I mean, he has big, chunky hits. I mean, back to back during link time, 6 to 8K hits when he crits. It's amazing feeling. And that's another pro, is that he so heavily benefits from link time. Felt like I needed link time on him more than any other character to really feel like I was contributing. And of course, he's one of the characters from the demo that has a slow. And slow is probably the most satisfying of the utilities, maybe right alongside frozen. Of course, the big downside to that is that slow comes with a pretty long cooldown on all of the characters who do have it in the demo. So it's something you'll definitely want to use sparingly and make sure you use it sort of to extend damage windows or maybe reduce the risk of attacks that otherwise catch people off guard. But he just has that good feeling stuff, which makes some of his downsides really, really noticeable. His gauge generation in the demo is insanely slow. I mean, he has to get through this multi-hit timed attack combo in order to get to the finisher, and most of the time he's gonna have to interrupt it to do one of his other skills or to avoid an attack. And while he does have some things that can help him get to that big hit more quickly every so often, it just feels like, again, one of those things that needs talents. The character itself is also really, really slow, but I mean, that's the trade-off you get for the type of damage that he puts out. So that's more of a characteristic and less of a con, but it's something to make note of because that may mean he's not your type of character. Another thing that is more noticeable about all characters with timed hits is that timed hits are kind of unforgivable. Now, they're really easy to get used to. More often than not, I just had to play a character for a few minutes and I could get a good feel of when the timed hits were supposed to be. But I don't like that if you miss the first timed hit in a combo, you just can't pick it back up and get a timed hit going forward. You have to either finish the combo and just accept that you're not getting any timed hits, or you need to stop and start the combo all over again to go for that initial timed hit. And both of those just don't feel as good. So I think they could definitely do some work with some of these things, the gauge generation I think being the most important, but at least he was the favorite character for me, just because I like to punch, and he punches hard. Number 9 is Catalina. Now, this is a very undeserved number 9. I'm going to tell you that right now because I can't help but feel like we're looking at an unstoppable monster when it comes to a fully kitted out Catalina, because she is one of the most flexible characters in the demo. Of course, that being her first pro. And what I mean by that is she's capable of both insanely high damage output when she's able to maintain her Ares gauge, flow between her different skills, and just bam, 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 just never stop or let up on an enemy. She also, on the flip side, has insanely good utility. And while you can mix and match these things, diving headfirst into either one means she's gonna have a lot of playstyles for people to offer up and worry about gearing up for and stuff like that. However, her downsides made her one of my least favorite characters to play in the demo, and one of the most important ones was how unintuitive her gameplay actually was. They describe the Ares gauge to her, they explain how to get it in the descriptions in-game, but they just don't really do a good job of getting you to that path where you realize how to output the most with it. That's something that's player discovered, and there's nothing wrong with that. Again, I'm just making note that the game itself doesn't do a good job at teaching you the level of complexity that the character can have and what that means for their overall outputs. I also found that it was very difficult to play as her against high mobility targets. Now, that's not to say she doesn't have good mobility. The Ares gauge in particular lets you zip around, and she does have a gap closer. She has a freeze. Like I said, she's got a lot of options, but it never feels good when you're trying to chain through her Ares gauge combos and the enemy is just, well, way out of your reach because they're moving around. More specifically referring to the Quakedile that you fight and less to the rock golem. That being said, this is a number 9 that is more based on feel than anything because I think she's going to be an absolute monster. So if you're looking forward to this character, let none of that discourage you. I think you're going to be pretty pleased with it. Number 8 is Gran, and honestly, I feel like I could put him higher up because when I started really looking at what Gran was capable of, I realized that we were looking at a character that was probably going to be a staple for people just looking to get in and just take something really simple. Now, he has flexible gameplay options as well, bringing some of the best debuffs and buffs that are in the demo itself. I mean, while we don't have a great use for one of them, specifically the one that gives you up to plus 70% damage mitigation on the team, he has the strongest defense reduction as well, as long as he's doing it at maxed out arts, which can make for better synergy with the higher DPS characters. On top of that, he's no slouch himself in the DPS category, even if he may not be as flashy or effective as some of the others. He's also really simple to play, so he's just a very approachable character, and it makes sense. He is the male protagonist option, so I'm wondering how Zeta is going to actually be. Now, he does take a little bit to get going. Getting your initial arts to 4 is not the smoothest of experiences, and that's something that can totally be fixed by talent, and he benefits more greatly from strong team play than a lot of other characters. Now, not to say other characters are lone wolves, but when you have these really powerful group buffs or really deep enemy debuffs, then you really need a team that can make use of them or your utility actually goes down. So I'm really curious to see what a higher level Gran looks like when he has more of his systems in place, because honestly, he felt pretty solid. I feel like he could go smack dab in the middle of this list and it would be a perfectly reasonable place to put him, but I'm gonna put him at number 8 because I just like some of the other characters better. It's my ranking after all. Number 7 is Io. Now, I wanted to like Io more. She's the only caster in the actual crew in the demo, and I really enjoyed playing her the first time around. First of all, she has great spell versatility between having a paralyze on the lightning ability, the ability to reduce defense and attack, while also being able to use those same spells to chain better into her big hitting attacks. You really feel good about using them. The problem that I'll get into a little bit later, though, has to do with those same utilities versus her actual gameplay style. Also, being a ranged character, so long as she's not being targeted, she's very comfortable to play. While she does have a lot of charged hits, which can be a little scary when you're dealing with a caster, she's so often far out in the back that you don't have to worry that much about it. You just have to make sure that the abilities themselves actually land. She also has a wind burst to open up, and that's going to be incredibly valuable when going for a high quality, full bursts in the full game when you're doing co-op material. Now, her negatives come with a mix of things. I mentioned that spell versatility before and how she has all these different debuffs. That's great and all, but I more often cared about how they comboed into her ability to get to her big attack, and less about the utilities they were bringing themselves, meaning they were likely being underutilized. And that's going to be something that a lot of people are going to fall into. You're at the very least, if she is the person who's doing the debuffs on your team, you're going to want to make sure they're used intelligently and probably not just spam everything to get to your biggest attack, especially on more difficult encounters. As a consequence of that, the passive payoff for doing all of that just felt a little bit underwhelming here. I think a lot of that has to do with how strongly she relies on cooldown reduction, meaning that in the demo, she couldn't go for the same high DPS build that the other ones went for without feeling like she was losing a bit of that spell slinging ability. She would lose debuff uptime, she would lose the ability to chain the spells together more frequently. So I'm curious to see what it looks like when she can commit a little bit more to the more damage aspected bits, because I think that will just make up for that passive payoff problem as a whole. I think it's just a lot of just going for that triple cooldown being the kind of recommended thing in the demo. Honestly, even with fast cast on her abilities when she's charging her passive payoff though, definitely feels like something that needs some more talents. I mean, when you have the circle down and you have the increased spell cast time, even with the timed attacks, that feels okay, but it still just doesn't feel as rewarding as other jobs do for getting to that maximum gauge, especially given what she usually has to go through to get to that point. Several charged hits, which you can then use to time, or just slinging the spells in general. But fortunately, I think a lot of these are just early game woes for her. There's a lot of room for growth, and I have a feeling that she's going to meet that caster expectation quite well. She does also have a good amount of utility, even if we only have 5 abilities in the demo. You could see a lot more of where she's going. She's not a pure caster output, big damage character. She has that paralyze, she has a heal, and she's likely to have some other things that are incredibly valuable as well. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what a higher level IO looks like. Number 6 is Sig Freed, and I feel kind of bad putting him here because when I looked back on my footage of Sig Freed, I didn't realize just how much I was really doing on him. I threw a few games at him just to get a feel because I wanted to try to understand every character, and while it was kind of simple to understand, I didn't fully grasp it the first time exactly where the benefits to the timed hits were going because I very rarely made it to the end of that combo. Fortunately, Sig Freed, incredibly simple to play, does really good damage, and with Stout Heart, he's able to finish a lot of those really hard-hitting attacks, even if he has to take a hit in return. The big thing is the long combo chain for his finisher being kind of the default thing. While it wasn't the worst to try to pull off with all the timed hits, it definitely felt like I was fighting an uphill battle, especially against the Quakedile itself, which was honestly just a generally difficult boss to really test some of the limits of these things. The Rock Golem was a lot better for kind of like a dummy fight to understand a lot of these characters. Fortunately, perfect dodging into his finisher is something that I think a lot of people want to get used to, which then comes with a high skill ceiling because you have to get used to those perfect dodge timings and put yourself in a bit more dangerous of a situation. He also has the same timed hits unrecoverable problem that Gondagoza had earlier, where if you miss the first one, you can't get to it without starting the combo over or just finishing the combo with where you left off. And again, I have to knock points here too because I just don't like that style. If I miss one timed hit, I'd like to be able to make up for that. And as long as I get a timed hit at the right spot before the finisher, go into the more powerful finisher. So Sig Freed, again, another character who it's just a little bit more about the feel and less about what he's actually capable of. Because man, when I went back and looked at the damage output from just those basic time swings, that was good feeling. That was good. Then we have number 5 with that of Narmaya. She, I thought, was going to be my favorite character. Gondagoza only wins because he's a monk. She would be my second, if not my first. So either way, I think she's a character that's going to both be a trap for new players in terms of her complexity, but also incredibly popular at the higher end. Because she has so many things, and really this starts to apply to all of the top 5 here who are incredibly capable even without any character progression. So Narmaya, what does she have? Insanely high mobility. She has the ability to swap between stances that are really fast and really slow, and they work in conjunction with each other to really push her damage output. Because of that, she does have really high damage. Much like Sig Freed, you'll often see numbers that you have to double check and make sure are yours because she puts out at least 4-digit numbers at level 10 very, very frequently. And she so easily chains her combos together that she just feels like once you get going, it's like one massive combo combo that never ends. It's not even like you're chaining between ability to this, to that. Even just her square triangle swaps in between the different stances with the empowered hits goes a really, really long way, and she feels incredibly good when you start working on that. She also, like Gondagoza, has a slow, and I still think that's an insanely good utility. More important to note is that it's actually on a counter skill, which I think the counter skills in this game are fantastic, and once we get into more talents and lower cooldowns, will probably be one of my go-to things to play with most characters. In fact, in the demo, I pretty much always equipped the counter attack because it just felt so good to have something like that. And all the counter attacks are incredibly forgiving, but I can't give those points to any particular one. Hers just happens to have a slow, and that's just insanely useful. Now, her only negatives are really that she's highly technical and doesn't have a lot of utility in the demo. Now, the highly technical bit, I think, is only going to become more technical as she gets more skills and as she levels up. And the low utility could possibly be fixed by what some of her abilities are in the full game. But she doesn't need the utility because her damage output is in itself a utility. So I think they've nailed this character for the most part. Her low level feels really good, and you see so much potential in her high level. So really excited to play her. I've said that about every character, but I mean, she was one of my, 2 favorites. So, more excited. And then we've got number 4 with Rackam. Oh man, so I'm laughing because he makes me laugh when I play him because I feel like I'm cheating practically. So because he's a ranged character, he's relatively safe, much like Io, but he's safer in ways I could have never foreseen. He is able to fire his attacks off really quickly. He's able to use his gauge very frequently. It's very easy to understand. He just has so many kind of ease of play elements to him so early on that you are likely to be naturally drawn to him. If you're into his aesthetic and the type of weapon that he uses, he is the kind of character who you can instantly become obsessed with, if not because you love him, but because he makes you feel good when you play the game. He even has this really cool slide dodge looking thing that's just, I don't know, it's kind of wild. I don't really like using it that much compared to just getting out of the way or going for a perfect dodge in the invincibility, but it's wild, and it makes for really good repositioning on him. Now, fortunately, his cons are really just something to rein in all of his advantages and not really in too negative of a way. For example, even though he's a ranged character, as you go further away from enemies, his damage is going to be reduced. So you're not looking to play like a sniper here. You're looking to play at the close to mid-range with this character, whatever makes you feel safest and whatever you can utilize in order to do the most damage. Getting closer during a link time, for example, and maybe staying a little bit further back when he's not targeting you and he's after someone else, but still within that sweet spot range. And of course, he is a glass cannon. You take a hit on Rackam, it's likely going to be lethal. So be very, very careful when picking him up. But I think for the most part, people will be fine playing him and that he's going to be pretty strong. Then number 3 is Zeta, also my number 3 favorite character. She is the Dragoon of the bunch, and she is also a hilarious amount of fun, much like Rackam. So she has really high mobility in a lot of different ways. Her special ability to jump off of enemies and chain it together with timed hits ends with a special slam attack, and the tracking on that thing goes insanely far. So she's able to stay in the air, which allows her to dodge a lot of attacks, especially ones that are closer to the ground, which are quite prevalent in the demo itself. She's even able to completely abandon that combo if she needs to keep the distance in order to stay safe. But she can also just completely home in on enemies with a number of attacks, so you really can't get away from her if you're an enemy, and that just makes her feel good to play. Not to mention, if you are able to keep going and going and going, the damage that she outputs for the amount of work she has to do, she is technical because of all the timed hits, but man, just popping off on like 6,000 to 7,000 damage on just landing 3 jumps into her finisher is something else entirely. It just feels super easy to access. And between that, the safe gameplay, and the high reward for her high execution, you just can't go wrong. Honestly, the only real con that I had for Zeta was the consistency on jumps when bosses move. Because it's basing the time of your timed hit based on when you hit their hitbox, it's not always going to be a consistent time. If a boss raises its arm and you hit it earlier, you have to be very ready to actually finish the combo that you have started. It's not the end of the world if you do drop the combo, but you're likely to be like, oh, I thought I had that multiple times when you're playing as her. But it just means there's a level of mastery with each boss that you have to go through specifically for this character. And that's good because then you don't ever really get bored of playing them. My top two are disgusting compared to the rest, to be honest. Number 2 is Yodarha, who most people just call Yoda, and for good reason. He's a big things come in small packages kind of guy, as is our number 1 on the list. Yodarha does an absolutely massive level of damage given his mobility, given his safety, and given everything about him. He's got so many invincibility frames. Literally at the end of every combo, he goes into an invincibility frame, and that's not even the most impressive thing. He's able to give himself invincibility, or if he's willing to sacrifice his gauge for it, the entire team gets the mirror image buff and can be invincible for a number of hits. But probably the biggest thing is his ability to do a 13-hit combo where he's essentially invincible the entire time, and you have tons of control over the directions he moves during this attack. You could just outright ignore some of the biggest attacks in the demo itself by activating the skill and making sure to land all of the timed hits that come with it. So Yodarha just doesn't mess around. You just have to be this hyper aggressive glass cannon. And that is his only con, is that if you do take the hit, much like Rackam, you're likely to suffer and die. So you just need to make sure that if you're committing to playing Yoda here, that you are willing to focus on getting all of those timed dodges and timed presses and invincibility combo finishers and comboing off skills into it. I mean, it's just, he's absolutely ridiculous. So I have a feeling you're going to see a lot of Yodargas. Speaking of characters you're going to see a lot of, number 1 is Charlotta. I realized I pressed record. I didn't even finish writing everything down for Charlotta. I was just, she's just an absolute monster. I can't believe how much damage she puts out for how easy she is to play. You literally just press square a handful of times. She starts swinging like mad as long as you can keep the enemy in range. If you're buffed and they're debuffed, I at one point did like 500 to 600 damage a hit, and it was hitting like 3 to 4 times a second. I couldn't believe the output that Charlotta had when she was able to really get online. And not to mention that as soon as you need it, you just press triangle and go into a parry frame in the middle of that big combo and then go right back to it. She's absolutely nutso. And that's before factoring in any of her skills, though they do have something to do with it. She has a gap closer that reduces enemy defense. She's able to attack from range with one of her attacks. She's able to do something similar to her square combo, except that it's one of her actual skills and does even more damage. But then she also has utility on top of that. She can take a 50% damage cut for herself and allies, so she reduces damage by half if she even does get hit. And then she has Valiant Stance, which just lets you deal more and more damage the longer that it lasts. Sure, if you take a hit, you lose the damage buff, but the fact that she can more than double her output near the end of Valiant Stance, and she already does really good damage without it, that's where things get absolutely absurd. If you set up an attack buff, a defense reduction on an enemy, if you're able to get that timed out with the end of Valiant Stance, the last several seconds, and then go into either her square combo or her other slashing attack, I just can't even describe how quickly boss health bars go away. It's ridiculous. And the fact that she has a parry, that on-demand parry on top of all of this, she had to be number 1. I literally couldn't not put her at number 1. I don't know what defects she has. I can't figure it out. I guess if you want to really get to it, she doesn't have a heal. I mean, that's it. She doesn't have a party-wide invincibility. It's the things that like Yodarha and a few other people have that I guess you could knock as a con. But who cares when you can do all the other things that Charlotta can do? And this is before she gets any advancement at all. So this is a character I'm concerned about, because if she only gets better from here, then the other characters better get even better than her, because otherwise I don't know how anyone's going to stand. Maybe against the highly mobile bosses, she might struggle a little bit more to keep her massive square combos going, her just button. But that's about it. I guess that's the only con, is even though she does have pretty good gap closing, that's the only thing I can come up with. So Charlotta, definitely number 1. Overall, though, talking about all these characters is really exciting, because this isn't really a list of worst to best as much as it is just acknowledging strengths and weaknesses of different characters. It's rare that I pick up a game with a ton of combat options and feel compelled to at least look into all of them a little bit more. A lot of the times I'll hone in on a character or a weapon type, and that'll be the character that I commit my all to. And Gondagoza, as much as he was my favorite, is far from the only character I plan on playing. I have to know how some of these characters advance. I have to know how some of them get stronger, and I feel like I want to experience that, which just means that Granblue is going to be a monster of a game for me to tackle because I'm gonna want to grind out a lot of stuff. Not to mention I'm starting on PS5 and then swapping to PC afterwards because I want to play on PC for multiplayer. So I have to kind of do it twice, although not really, but oh man. At the end of the day though, I'll wrap this up. I'm excited. All the characters are pretty cool in their own right, and it's only about half of the characters we know are going to be in the game. We know there's going to be 20 on release and 22 as of April, and we'll see what happens after May when we'll see other character additions and content and all that and yada, yada, yada. But that's going to be a wrap for this video ranking the demo characters from Granblue Relink. Let me know what you think of the characters in the comment section of the video below, and I will see you for more Granblue as well as other stuff on the channel. This is the first video on the channel, so hopefully you're ready to stick around for a whole lot more. Anyway, I'll see you all in the next one, and until then, take care.